I'm Adabara, the partner technical leader for UK partners at Databricks. This is another installment of our partner champions spotlight series, and I'm delighted to have Dan with us today. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Adabara.
Fantastic. So Dan is one of our champions and also an MVP. But what I'll do, Dan, is just to ask you, for anyone who hasn't met you yet, right? Who is Dan and what do you do in your current role?
Yeah, well, thank you so much first for inviting me. So, yeah, I'm Dan Williams. I'm a Databricks MVP, and I'm also a Partner Solutions Architect Champion. And I also run a Databricks-focused consultancy called Decision Forest. I also rant on my YouTube channel at Decision Forest, so definitely like and subscribe. And I've been working with Databricks. I mean, pretty much I started with Spark back in the day, about like 8-9 years ago. And back then I started with machine learning, right? Because at that point, Spark was great for many machine learning use cases where you needed to deal with a lot of data, right? And in the past years, I've been focusing a lot on regulated industries such as banking, insurance, and a whole bunch of other areas. Okay, but my work kind of sits at the intersection between a couple of things, right? So both architecture and obviously adoption, because you also need to promote enablement and help teams, right? So what I do, I kind of help organizations design Lakehouse platforms, but also I'm making sure that these platforms get adopted properly, right? Through governance, building internal capabilities, operating models, and so on and so forth.
Okay, nice. And is that what you've just gone through? Is that also the same thing as what Decision Forest is focused on? Because if not, then I'll ask you, what Decision Forest is and what you focus on. If you want to add anything just specific to Decision Forest.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So Decision Forest spun off specifically focusing on Databricks, right? So we focus only on Databricks, and we cover a couple of things, right? So we cover, again, platform architecture and governance, and specifically around Lakehouse and Unity Catalog. Then we also do, obviously, we do modernizations, we do migration. So we kind of help companies move away from like these fragmented data stacks to a full Lakehouse architecture. But at the same time, we also kind of help companies build their own internal capabilities, okay? Define their own patterns and kind of become independent, right? Instead of just relying on somebody else to tell them what to do, right? So we help them build their own internal Databricks teams.
Fantastic. Okay, so for anybody watching, if you are interested in any of those services, right, give Dan a call, Decision Forest.
Definitely.
So that, right, so you're a few things, right, from a Databricks standpoint, right? You're a Databricks champion, which we'll talk about, right? You're also an MVP, which is like the highest level of recognition that Databricks gives any sort of practitioner. But at the same time, you're also recognized as a RSA, which is, I think, Resident Solution Architect, which is Databricks saying that we trust you almost as one of Databricks to be able to deliver technical projects. So a lot of things there. But I mean, what do these recognitions mean to you? Like, how do you break it down internally, right? You being an MVP, being a champion, being an RSA. Like, what does it mean to you, and how do you use those different designations in different scenarios?
There are a lot of designations, right? But to be honest,
not many people have this many, right? Sometimes people just have one. But
that's true, and I'm blessed. I'm blessed to have all of these, and I'm also a Databricks certified instructor now. So
there you go, another one.
So yeah, again, I'm blessed to have all of these designations. But listen, the biggest value is the connections and the relationships that you build in this ecosystem, right? Because it's about how you work with others in order to be recognized in certain ways. Okay, so listen. So for example, the Champions program, right? This recognizes engineers and architects who are delivering, let's say, complex projects. But this is a partner program, right? So if you deliver complex projects, being a Databricks partner. On the other hand, okay, the MVP program is more about contributing to the community. Okay, so you're sharing knowledge, you're building some demos, you're kind of helping others adopt the platform. So these two are completely different things, and they require different skill sets as well. And then of course the RSA part, because you're helping clients build solutions on behalf of Databricks, and that is amazing, right? That is a great designation. And on the other hand, when you're talking about trainings, again, you're helping others build their capabilities. The beautiful thing about all of these is that you're close to all of the Databricks teams, right? So you're close to field engineering, you're close to product teams. So you can actually see where customers actually struggle and where the platform is actually going, because Databricks is getting better every day, and there's so many initiatives that are getting spun off every day that it's very hard to keep up to date with everything that's going on.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. So, to have all of these designations, clearly you've invested, right? You've invested the time in improving your Databricks knowledge and so on and so forth, invested in the Databricks ecosystem. And my question is, like, if you think about all of the different choices that any architect or engineer or data professional has in the market, right? There are a lot of other options besides Databricks, right? But you've chosen to double down with Databricks. Maybe you've also invested in other platforms. But I'm interested in what kind of drew you to this Databricks data intelligence platform, compared to other platforms out there, as one where you wanted to invest a lot of time and effort as a data professional.
Yeah. Well, if you have 2 hours to tell you about my story, but no, I'm going to give you the quick insights, right? So the way I started with Databricks, okay, I didn't start as Databricks as the Lakehouse platform. I started with Spark. So back then, Databricks was pretty much just Spark. Okay, and I didn't think that we're gonna get this far, to be honest. I didn't think that Databricks is gonna grow into such a big platform. And obviously now, if I would give you an answer, it would be kind of the architecture, right? Because it helps simplify those models where historically, companies had various systems, for data lakes, for warehouses, and obviously for AI, and sorry, not for AI, because AI is relatively new, but pretty much BI and machine learning. And that fragmentation kind of created a lot of governance issues. It created a lot of duplication and a lot of complexity that was hard to manage. So pretty much the Lakehouse model, simplified that. And this would be the answer now if you would want to specialize on Databricks. But the way that I started incrementally as the platform became better and better, right? So obviously Spark, then you got ML Flow, then you got Delta Lake, then you got Unity Catalog, and then all of these guys kind of were put together into this Lakehouse architecture. And obviously now they're developing more and more tools, but it kind of grew incrementally, right? It wasn't like this Lakehouse model straight off the bat.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then also at some point along that journey, right, you decided to then go for the champions designation or the MVP designation, because those things require certain dedicated processes, right? So I'm just wondering again, was there any moment, or was there like a project, or was there something that kind of triggered you to then say, okay, now it's time to go and become a champion, or now is the time to go and become an MVP? I'm just trying to understand that journey that led you into then becoming a champion or an MVP. And I don't even know which one did you get first, right? Was it the champion or MVP? It would be good to, I think for other people to understand that journey if they're thinking about that.
Perfect. So yeah, this is a very good question, because I don't even know how I got here. And I'm going to be honest, right? So of course, the first one was the champions. Okay, so the champions program is older than the MVP program, and it didn't. It just came through because I've done a lot of delivery work on Databricks back when there weren't that many people that were doing production projects. So how did that happen was that a partner that I was working for at that time was invited, to join this program and to propose people that have hands-on experience with Databricks. And pretty much that's how I got it. I got it through a different partner, and that was like many years ago. But again, at the core of everything sat the idea that you needed to have real production experience with Databricks and solve let's say, difficult problems. Because in order to become a champion, again, you need to be a Databricks architect and you need to show proof that you have that experience. For me, back then, I don't know exactly whether it's still the case now for new candidates, but you needed to have 3 production systems in place in order to be considered, right? And that was quite rare back then. Not very rare, but nevertheless rarer than it is now. Now, the second one, okay, if we're talking about the MVP, again, with the MVP as well, I've been doing a lot of community work around Databricks. I was teaching Spark back in 2019. I was doing YouTube videos and whatnot, and I've been focusing on Spark and Databricks for a very long time. And obviously, throughout the years, my community grew, and a lot of people kind of learned Databricks from me. Okay, not from me, like they learned it by themselves, but nevertheless, I was kind of guiding them throughout their process. And eventually, Databricks reached out and they said, "Do you want to be a part of the Databricks MVP program?" I was like, "Sure, of course." And that was another thing, right? I didn't chase the MVP status. I didn't chase the becoming a partner champion, right? These things, you need to chase your own personal development and improvement, and then people will start recognizing that, and then things will happen. But you don't need to start from where do I need to get to. Everything in life is a journey, right? And you need to enjoy that journey. You need to do the things that make you push forward. Okay, so that aspect is the community work for me, and I love sharing, architecture patterns, building demos, and I love contributing back to the system. And eventually, the ecosystem kind of gives it back to you. Okay, but you need to give it first.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thanks for that. And I think you already kind of touched on it, right, in terms of what got you to become a MVP or champion. But looking at it in terms of the skills that you've developed that has then allowed you to be effective, as an MVP or as a champion, for example, technical skills or liking to share content or share learnings with people. I don't know if there are any other examples you would say of like skills that you've had to develop. You talked about, developing yourself, right? Like what sort of skills should people be developing in themselves in order to, one day become a champion or even maybe an MVP as well? Like what would you say from that standpoint?
Yeah. First off, I think the most important thing is to first enjoy the work that you're doing, right? Because if you enjoy the work that you're doing, it's going to lead you to the point that actually matters. And that's kind of staying hands-on with the platform. Because Databricks evolves so fast, right? So many teams are building so many new projects, so many new tools that you can use, and that becomes another thing, right? So we have Lakebase, we have Agentbricks, we have so many tools that just come out, right? And every time, Databricks releases these new things, anything, you need to try to experiment with those tools in real systems, right? So you kind of need to always keep up to date with what's happening. And that is a habit that is quite hard, right? Like many people just want to get their job done and that's it, right? No, if you want to become a champion, if you want to become an MVP, you need to have that drive to try new things all the time, right? And that is that is the most important aspect.
Okay. Okay. Great. And again, based on your experience and based on everything that you know, is there anything that you would say is a misconception of what people think they need to become a champion or again MVP, right? I don't know, people from outside might look at it and think, I need to be a level 400 super engineer that knows everything about Databricks or not. I don't know what they're thinking, but based on what you know, are there certain things where actually, you don't need to worry about that's not really what to look for. Just instead focus on what you said in your previous answer. I don't know if there are any misconceptions. So, yeah.
Well, yes, a big one is the fact that you need all these certifications, and that's gonna get you all the statuses, and that's gonna get you on projects, and that is gonna help you a lot. Like, listen, certifications help a lot. Okay, and I like certifications, and I do have certifications myself, right? Obviously, because I became a champion and so on and so forth, right? But certifications don't prove that you have the real world experience that you need in order to work on real Databricks projects. And also certifications just show that you know, let's say, the basics, right? But what matters is the impact that you have. Okay, so the impact that you have is going to be based only when you actually deliver production applications and when you help others succeed, right? When you have your team be successful in that implementation, when you kind of contribute back with some knowledge, to the ecosystem. And to be honest, like, technical depth matters, but listen, like, you cannot know everything, and I don't know everything. Like, many times, imagine, like, when you try to reach the whole platform, you're never going to know everything 100%. Okay, so you're not going to be the best at everything. But what you can do, you can influence, and you can make sure that you enable teams in a way in which they can achieve high levels of productivity, right? And then obviously, whenever you're going to narrow down on a particular subject, then you can always learn that thing 100%. But nevertheless, don't focus too much on the technical depth initially. Focus on the impact that you have when it comes to delivering work for your clients, because in the end, that's what matters now.
Okay, thank you. And then if you think about, impact of your work on your clients or what you're doing for your clients, if you take it one step back, like what are you, when a client is coming to you, and I'm sure they come to you for many different reasons because Databricks solves different types of problems, but are there any sort of types of problems specifically? I don't know if you think about the last 18 months, right? Where these are certain specific problems that a potential customer could have where they will come to you for a solution, and then you would use the Databricks platform to solve that solution, right? So without going into any specific names or anything, just what the trends are in terms of those problem areas that they're needing to solve with Databricks.
Yeah, definitely. So again, I work in financial services with banks and financial institutions. So a pattern that I see always, right, is the fact that they work with fragmented systems. Okay, so let's say you have transactions data in one place, then you have some customer data in another place, and then let's imagine a risk scenario, right? You're going to have some risk models that will also sit in a different system. Okay, now what happens is that Databricks allows you to allows you to put everything in one place. You can bring all of that together with the unified Lakehouse architecture. So let's say you can run, I don't know, like streaming pipelines where you ingest this transaction data, then you can combine it with historical, let's say, customer data, and then you can also run machine learning models. And let's assume a fraud detection scenario, right? You can just detect these type of fraud patterns.
Yeah.
The fact that you bring all of that data together is going to enhance your ability to make decisions, in real time, and I think that is exactly where the platform actually shines.
Yeah. Okay. So building that Lakehouse architecture. Okay, cool. And again, within Databricks, right? Are you seeing more? Are there certain parts of the platform where you're seeing more building more solutions, right? There's the data engineering, there's the machine learning, there's the governance, there's the AI. So just the sort of architectures that you put together, are they? Is there again any trend or anything that you observe in what you're working on with customers, like when you're trying to break that problem down into architectures?
Yeah.
I know you talked about the lake house, but specifically in terms of the components, are there certain things that you're leveraging in your architectures?
Yeah. So just to come back a little bit on this, right? So usually when we're looking at use cases in general, right? The mandate that these clients give is like, look, we kind of want a single platform where we can just combine all of our data and we can run analytics and AI on top of it. So this is kind of the core umbrella that sits on top of everything. And then obviously you can work on different narrower use cases. But for example, again, if I come back to banking and financial services, you can do again like fraud detection, that's real time. You can do customer 360 analytics. You can do credit risk modeling. You can do a whole bunch of things and obviously we're in Europe, so we're going to do a lot of regulatory reporting. Those are really big use cases. And if we're going to kind of break it down then into how we would break it down in an architectural pattern, obviously you're going to have a couple of layers. So you're going to first have ingestion. So you're going to have either like batch pipelines or streaming pipelines, and you're going to need to bring that data into a Delta Lake format. Okay. Then when it comes to the medallion architecture, we have this thing. Obviously, we have we need to refine data from raw to curated, and that is pretty much a medallion architecture. So we have the raw layer, then the bronze layer, then we have the silver and gold. And then we also need to think about the governance, which is where Unity Catalog comes in, and then we have we need to take care of things like access control, lineage, compliance, and all of these things are really important in financial services. So these are kind of the big things. And if I would just break it down, if we want to just simplify it, okay, so we have streaming for data ingestion, then we have SQL and BI for analytics, then we have MLflow for machine learning, and then we have Unity Catalog for governance, and obviously generative AI components. But these are all the pieces that people will usually use when it comes to their Databricks implementations.
Okay, great. I think what I'm getting out of that is it all depends on the use case, right?
100%.
Based on the use case, then different components can come into play. Okay.
100%. That's the beauty of Databricks, is it has so many tools available that you can literally solve any type of data and AI use case.
Okay, great. I mean, if you think about the projects that you have with customers, right? Over the years, are there any, I don't know, 1 to 2 or maybe 3 sort of best practices, right? Where if someone is working on a project on Databricks, if you take this and that into account, then that can help set you up for success, right? So like best practice, I guess, in terms of projects on Databricks. Are there anything that you've observed from that standpoint?
Best practices, well, the best practice, the first best practices is the fact that you need to start with governance. Okay.
Governance.
Because what happens is that many people kind of just throw data in, and then they're just trying to solve some use cases and whatever. But then what happens is that eventually, because of let's say silos within their own teams, they end up duplicating data and all that stuff, right? So if you start with governance, right, if you build the platform first, right, and you have proper lineage and you have proper access controls in place, right? Then everything kind of becomes a lot easier. So everything starts from data governance, from my perspective.
Okay. Cool. Governance. At Databricks, that's our favorite thing, right? Governance, Unity catalog. So if you start from there, typically you you set yourself up for success, hopefully, right? But again, looking at the flip side, and you kind of touched on it, right? Are there sort of any kind of like anti-patterns or bad practice where, if you're going down that route, then you're potentially setting yourself up for failure, or you're going to have difficulty down the line. And potentially one of those points is if you don't take governance into account, I guess, right? But I don't know if you have anything else to touch on that sort of anti-patterns or like no-nos,
Yeah. No. As I mentioned earlier, right? And this is the exact reason why you need data governance first, because what happens is that many teams treat, let's say, Databricks kind of like an ETL tool. And obviously ETL or ELT is the main use case. That's what actually, that's the core thing that you can do, right? But nevertheless, Databricks is not just an ETL or ELT tool, okay? And what happens is that teams, what they do, they just migrate some pipelines, from some legacy systems, but they don't think about changing the whole architectural pattern, okay? So they don't adopt the Lakehouse models. So what happens is that, again, if they don't have data governance in place and they don't share data assets, they're just going to have a whole bunch of data duplication around, okay? So you're going to have different teams that copy data sets into their own environments instead of actually consuming shared and governed tables. So that still happens regardless, because in large organizations, you're going to have various teams that are responsible for various products.
Yeah.
And obviously there will be a level of duplication just because of access, but you need to strive for that goal to have shared governed tables so that you don't have any lineage problems, and therefore you're also going to have lower costs because you're going to have lower storage and compute costs to a certain extent, because you're not going to duplicate data too much. And again, to reinforce this, right? Again, if you delay governance, it's going to be very hard to change all of that organizational structure. Okay, so it's very, very important to also train your teams around proper data patterns and sharing data assets from the beginning.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you. Really helpful knowledge there. So now bringing it back to the Champions program, right? For people watching who would want to become a champion one day with Databricks, a partner champion from within their organization, what would you say they should start from, right? And there are different places, like is it going to be from like the certifications or the real world projects, or I don't know, mentoring, being mentored by someone or whatnot, right? I mean, I'm just making this up, but like, what would be your thoughts to somebody who wants to become a champion one day, like where they should start from?
If their goal is to just become a champion or an MVP, that's the wrong goal. That's not a goal. Again, as I mentioned, the goal is to be better than you were yesterday. The goal is to be a better professional and make sure that you understand more, let's say, design patterns, understand how to build various use cases, and understand the ecosystem better, right? That is the main goal. And then eventually, let's say you have that, okay? So let's assume that you are there already, okay? In order to become a champion, you can focus on architectural leadership, okay? So you can try to guide projects towards success, right? To guide projects to follow proven patterns. Then you also need to think about enablement, because it's not just about you, right? It's about helping other engineers, understand the platform and adopting some best practices. Databricks does a great job at telling you what these best practices are. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? You don't need to be too, I don't know, crazy original, because you already have these things available. Okay, and especially now with AI, you have all these things in place, and you just need to know where to look. And the third one is kind of like, again, engage with the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay. In order to become a champion, in order to become an MVP, in order to become anything, right, you need to be visible. People need to know that you exist. That's why we're even recording this video, right? Because otherwise, what would be the point, right? It's important to be visible and to provide value to the ecosystem, right? And if you can bring some real insights from various projects into the public view, then that will help others, and therefore this type of engagement will definitely help. So these are the three things that I would focus on if I'm already a data professional and I already am interested in these things in the first place. Because just becoming an MVP or a champion for the sake of it, it makes no sense.
Thanks for that. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of the interview now. I have some last quick fire questions. But before we do that, I just want to ask you again, because you've been involved with the Databricks ecosystem for such a long time, right, from the early days.
Yeah.
I want to get your perspective on the impression that Databricks, I guess in the past, or I don't know, maybe still now, I don't know, has been seen as a tool for mainly technical users, right? But Databricks now is seeing itself as a tool that can go beyond the technical users and also business users as well. I don't know what you've observed in your time on Databricks, if it's true now that, there are business users who are part of the user base. It's not just a technical tool for engineers. Like, what have you observed in that time that you've been on the ecosystem?
Well, Databricks was a lot more focused on Spark initially, right? And it was mostly for developers, right? Because you had obviously you had Spark, you had it both on, of course, on Python and Scala and whatnot. But now Databricks is focusing a lot more on SQL, and as you see, it's focusing a lot more on these business users. Okay. And that's kind of a thing that I've noticed in the past, in the past year. So it is highly technical, obviously, but it tries to simplify a lot of these workflows so that it can cater for a larger audience, also from a business side, rather than just from a developer perspective. This can be both a plus and a minus. Obviously, my background is software engineering. Okay, so I came to let's say Databricks because of Spark, because of the fact that it had PySpark, and therefore it was easy for me to kind of learn it. And now obviously things are getting more simplified from let's say development perspective, but at the same time, I believe that it is a good thing because it will reach a wider audience.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So now we're at the end. So we've reached what I call a very quick fire questions, right? 1 or 2 word answers just to get your perspective. So in Databricks today, yes, there are a lot of new features coming out all the time. But if there was one feature in Databricks that you're most excited about, what feature would that be?
Well, obviously Unity Catalog, that's one, because it will keep evolving. But I like delta sharing, right? And I think this is underrated as well because
Unity Catalog.
Delta sharing, I mean, right? Because again, as I was talking about data duplication and whatnot, right? Like the ability, to share these governed data sets across organizations without actually copying it is really, really powerful. And I think people are underutilizing delta sharing, and that is something that I'm really, really excited about, because I think that more organizations will start using it more and more.
Okay. And then if there's one resource, just one that you would recommend for somebody who wanted to go and, go deeper on Databricks, right? Whether it's a course, a book, a repo, a talk, or, a YouTube channel or whatever, right? But what would that one resource be for somebody who wanted to go and, become a Databricks expert or learn more?
Well, obviously now you just I have to say you have to go to my YouTube channel, right? So at
Your
Decision
YouTube
Forest,
channel.
because that is the primary.
What's your
that is
YouTube channel called?
at Decision Forest, that is the primary source of Databricks info, right? No, but that's again, this is a shameless plug. But no, listen. I used to learn from books. Okay, so I used to learn from books. Now, obviously, books are not that relevant anymore in the AI era. Okay, I do believe that you should leverage AI tools as much as you can in order to learn Databricks. It's incredible the how not how easy, but how fast and how amazing learning Databricks using AI tools is, to be honest. And I would definitely, yeah, think about it. The main source of information is the Databricks documentation. Okay, that is the main source. But then these AI tools sit on top of that, and and they will help you learn a lot faster because you can customize your learning experience that way. Okay, and I think these are the best ways. And obviously, the third way are instructor-led trainings. And if you see my name there, definitely join those sessions because I will help you, learn the platform as much as I can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of the interview. Great conversations. Thanks for sharing all that knowledge. It was fantastic to have you with us today. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to watch this interview and learn a lot. So thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you so much, Alabara. Yeah, appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you.